Welcome back to the next chapter of our journey, Ashes of Emberville. Volume 2 picks up exactly where the soot-stained shadows left off. Ross's apartment was full. Echo sat beside him on the sofa, her laugh cutting through the room. The glow from the view screen cast flickering shadows during a horror movie no one was watching. It was the usual group. 3 guys, 3 women, a circle that met several times a week, mostly at Ross's place. Their evenings followed an unspoken routine: cards, cigarettes, drinks. Everyone was of age, and the rule was simple: no one got sloppy drunk. Tipsy was fine, buzzed was expected, but never messy. Ross nursed his second drink, just enough to smooth the edges. Echo was on her 3rd or 4th. Her laugh grew louder. Her attention was not on the screen, it was on Blaine. Ross watched them. Blaine sat across from them, leaning close. Echo touched his arm lightly, their conversation moving in a rapid, easy rhythm that ignored the rest of the room. Ross was not the only one who noticed. Vivian, Blaine's partner, sat stiffly on a nearby chair. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes never left them. When the banter tipped into mock wrestling, too much contact, too much something, Vivian stood up. "Let's get some air," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. No one objected. They followed her to the patio, leaving the tension swirling behind like smoke. Ross lit another cigarette and leaned on the railing. He exhaled slowly. He was tired of these gatherings, the fake laughs, the casual betrayals, the group's unspoken tolerance for infidelity. Everyone knew, but no one said anything. Ross took another drag. He had bigger things on his mind. The night ended the way it always did. Someone broke the rule. Tonight it was Blaine and Echo. Vivian pulled Blaine aside around the corner of the building. Her voice was low and clipped. Whatever she said, it was not kind. Ross was left guiding Echo back inside before she could wander toward the downtown bars. He glanced at the entrance, already picturing the complaint. If Blaine threw up out front, it would be another call from the landlord. Inside, Ross handed Echo a mug of strong coffee and coaxed her into her favorite chair. She resisted at first, her eyes glassy and defiant. But over time, the sharpness in her voice dulled. Her shoulders sank. 5 hours later, the apartment had returned to silence. The others were long gone. The dawn was beginning to lighten the windows. Echo sat cross-legged on the couch, thumbing through notifications without seeing them. Ross watched her from the armchair. He set his cup down and leaned forward. "Echo," he said gently, "we need to talk." She did not look up. Not yet. But the silence that followed said she heard him. "What?" Echo asked. Her tone was sharp, as if she resented being pulled away from her screen. "I'm leaving school," Ross said. That got her attention. Her posture straightened, her eyes narrowing. "What? You can't do that. What will—" She stopped herself. "People think," Ross finished for her, his voice flat. A beat passed. He let the silence settle. "I'm at the point where I don't care anymore." Echo looked mildly concerned now, but only mildly. "But I need you here with me," she said. "I can't be on that campus by myself." Ross sighed, trying a softer angle. "Something about all this just feels wrong." He paused, searching for the right words. "I was kind of hoping we could talk about it, about what's been bothering me." That stopped her. He could see it in her eyes, a flicker of panic. This was not the kind of conversation she liked to have. It was outside the usual script. Ross saw it clearly. The shift, the discomfort, the emotional dodge. "Of course we can talk about it," she said quickly, her tone forced. "Just let me sober up first. I'll come by this afternoon." Ross smiled faintly. "Okay." He stepped outside onto the patio, lit a cigarette, and watched the sunrise bleed into the horizon, soft oranges melting into blues. Inside, Echo glanced back down at her screen and kept scrolling. That afternoon, Echo returned. She looked better, rested and focused, as if the morning's haze had lifted. She stepped inside Ross's apartment. After a few minutes of careful small talk, she brought it up. "So, did you change your mind about dropping out?" she asked. She tried to keep her tone light. Ross leaned back into the couch. He decided to open up, at least a little. "Did you ever think maybe a person would be happier just living a regular life, without school, without chasing all the things we're supposed to chase?" Echo looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Ross said, "I work with people in my side job. Some of them have been there most of their lives, just building things, putting parts together in a factory, and they seem happy." Echo considered that. "But what about money?" she asked. "If you want a good income, you need a degree. Otherwise you end up—" Ross gently cut in. "End up what? Not having a big house? Not driving an expensive car? Not being able to show off to your family that you made it because you have a diploma on your wall?" Echo blinked, visibly thrown. "Well, that is the point, is it not? A comfortable life?" She said it as if on autopilot. Ross lit a cigarette. "What if someone's idea of a comfortable life is different?" She gave him a polite, almost sheepish smile. "I never really thought about that. That was always the path you take in my family. College, career, success. That is it." Ross nodded. "Yeah, mine did too." Echo sat quietly for a moment, then said, "Why don't you come back to class today? Just see how it feels, and not decide everything right now." Ross smiled a little. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it won't be that bad." Echo's smile brightened. "I'll be right there next to you." Next chapter. Ross and Voss sat in their usual spot, an old bench outside the school building. It was their in-between space, a place to breathe before the next lecture. "So, that's why you were gone the last few days," Voss said. She sat with her legs crossed, sipping from a lukewarm cup of vending machine coffee. "Yeah," Ross replied. His voice was low and distracted. "I've been thinking about life, the future, all of it." He stared across the campus courtyard, watching students wrapped in coats and headphones, lost in their own orbits. "Anyway," he added, trying to shift the mood, "anything new around here?" Voss handed him the local paper, folded to the front page. "A former student this time," she said. Ross scanned the headline. "Another murder." He muttered it under his breath. "This one hit close to home," Voss said. "The president is talking about a two-student policy now. Always travel in pairs." Ross shook his head and gave a dry laugh. "That'll go over well. Students hate being told what to do." Voss checked her watch. "Time to go." Ross didn't move right away. The paper rested on his knee, the headline staring up at him like it knew something he didn't. Next chapter. It went exactly as Ross had expected. Professor Dreyer did not acknowledge him. Not a glance. Not a word. Ross had half expected a smirk, perhaps a sharp look over the rim of those glasses that said, "I knew you would be back." But there was nothing. Just the cold efficiency Dreyer was known for, his voice cutting through the air like a blade as he delivered another lecture. Ross sat beside Echo, notebook open and pen in hand, pretending to take notes. The topic was mathematical foundations of magical application. It was the kind of subject that demanded focus and precision. But Ross was not focused. He was thinking. It never stopped anymore. First came the question, did Echo realize he was done for the semester? With the number of days he had missed, there was no realistic path to the grade he needed. He had slipped too far behind. So why was he even here? For Echo. Perhaps. He liked her company, but he was not in love with her. Not in that magical sense that bends your sense of time and reason. Maybe he was here trying to rejoin the system. Go to school. Get the degree. Get the job. Be normal. But as the lecture droned on, equations appearing and vanishing on the screen, Ross was not listening. He just wanted out. 2 weeks passed in a blur. The class was out now, and Ross strolled through campus with no real direction, caught between the idea of going to study hall or just heading home. Not that it mattered. He had stopped doing his coursework entirely. These days, he went to class just to be around Echo, or perhaps just to keep up the appearance that he still cared. He was not sure which anymore. Then she stepped in front of him. "So now Travis told me you started ghosting him too?" Echo's voice was sharp, cutting straight through his haze. Ross blinked. "Whoa, should we really be talking about this here?" A pair of students passed by, snickering as they glanced back. "Why not?" Echo pressed, not lowering her voice. "You stopped talking to Travis. You have basically disappeared from our group. You barely even talk to me anymore. The only time I see you now is in class." Ross pulled her aside, lowering his voice. "It's okay. I'm just going through some stuff. I don't really feel like you would understand." Echo hesitated. Then, with a sniff, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "Here, I want you to have this," she said, her voice quieter now. "I just want to help you." Before he could reply, she turned and walked off. Ross unfolded the paper. The number for the school's counseling office. He let out a dry, half-hearted laugh. "Oh, great. Now I'm crazy." He pocketed the paper and shook his head. Could this day get any more bizarre? Then he heard it. "Oh, my dear, I need to speak to Professor Dreyer. It is urgently urgent." The voice was strange, overly polite and slightly theatrical, but something about it made Ross freeze. He turned toward it. Something in that voice tugged at him. The secretary was earning her pay today. Standing before her was a woman dressed in crisp white slacks and a matching blouse, topped with a long denim trench coat. Oversized sunglasses masked her face. A police badge hung around her neck like an accessory. "He hasn't responded to our messages in 2 weeks, the woman said, her voice equal parts exasperated and theatrical. The secretary glanced through a stack of papers. Because it was not a formal summons, he declined to speak with the department. "I'm sorry." The woman let out a dramatic sigh. "Ugh, well, that's just dreadful." She looked around the hallway as if she might spot Professor Dreyer hiding behind a fern. "Anyone seen a Professor Dreyer lurking about? Hello?" Ross, still lingering at the edge of the scene, felt a pull, maybe the voice or maybe curiosity. He stepped forward. "Professor Dreyer is hard to talk with," he said. "I know that, from experience." The woman turned to him, eyebrows lifting over the rim of her sunglasses. "Well, isn't that just peachy?" Ross stared at her. Something felt familiar. "You're the person from the newspaper," he said. "The one on the investigation." She extended a hand with a confident flourish. "Eliza Brightwell. Or Towers, depending on who you ask." Ross hesitated, then took her hand. "The fracture hero," he said, a touch of awe in his voice. Eliza struck a quick pose, as if cameras were watching. "My reputation precedes me." Behind the desk, the secretary gave them both a look that said, "Please move this circus elsewhere." Ross scratched his head. What did you need him for?" Eliza tilted her head, considering. "Magic," she said, her tone suddenly serious. They walked together beneath the early afternoon sky, weaving through campus paths as students hurried in every direction, caught in the rush between classes and obligations. Eliza walked with purpose, her denim trench coat swaying behind her. Ross followed, unsure of where they were going, but oddly not caring. "You look like you know a little something," Eliza said, glancing sideways with a smile. "Let me buy you a drink." "Sure," Ross said, surprised by how easily the word came out. "Unless you have something to do?" Eliza inquired. Ross looked down at the crumpled paper in his hand, the number for the counseling office. He stared at it for a moment. Then, slowly, he crumpled it tighter and tossed it into a nearby trash bin. "No," he said. "I'm free. I have nowhere to go. I'm Ross, by the way." Eliza smiled softly, almost knowingly. "Then come on, Ross. First round is on me." And they kept walking. Ross could not quite put it into words. Sitting across from him was a woman who did not feel real, more like someone pulled from the pages of a fairy tale. She was bold, self-assured, and unapologetically herself. with just enough sass to keep him guessing. He had to remind himself not to stare. He had followed the fracture heroes in the papers. He had read about the fracture war, the ones who had saved cities while the rest of the world watched. One of them was here, right in front of him. She was drinking lemonade as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world, and somehow no one around them noticed. "So, my dear," Eliza said, sipping her drink and setting it down with a crisp clink. "You are a student of Mr. Too Good for the Department?" Ross snapped out of his trance. "Yes, well, not much longer." He caught himself. "Ah," Eliza said, her smile turning knowing. "Deciding to drop out, are we?" Ross exhaled, nodding. "Yeah, the professor. He is not just difficult for the department." Eliza tilted her head. In the reflection of her sunglasses, Ross could see himself, small and tired, but starting to feel a little more awake. "So he's an asshole," she said, perfectly casual. Ross laughed, more than he had meant to. "You could say that." The conversation flowed with an ease Ross had not expected. Eliza seemed to genuinely enjoy talking to him. "And then we saved the world," Eliza said dramatically, waving one hand in the air. Ross chuckled, watching as she leaned back and sighed with theatrical flair. "Oh, the emotions," she sighed. "I feel a mascara meltdown coming if I don't stop thinking about all my heartless world-saving decisions." Ross laughed harder as she pulled a compact fan from her coat pocket and flicked it open with a practiced motion. She fanned herself with exaggerated grace. "There," she purred. "I'm more composed now." He leaned forward slightly, the laughter fading just enough to let him steer the conversation. "About Professor Dreyer. He might not want to help, but there's someone else here. Another instructor." Eliza slowed her fanning. "Oh?" "Yeah. Her name's Voss. She's more laid back, easier to talk to. If anyone on staff would be open to hearing you out, it's her." Eliza lowered the fan slowly, a spark of interest lighting her expression. "Fantastic," she said, her smile returning with sharp precision. Next chapter. "Oh, of course I'll help," Voss said as Ross and Eliza stepped into her office. The space was warm and lived in. Books filled every shelf, and small glowing orbs of soft light floated near the ceiling. "I'm sorry about the professor," Voss added, closing the door. "He has a unique personality." Eliza smiled with practiced grace. "Yes, well, there is a time and place for eccentrics, but this is becoming serious. Murder number 12 was just last night." The weight of that number landed. Voss pulled her chair out and sat beside Eliza, not across from her. It was a quiet gesture that evened the power dynamic. Ross always appreciated that about Voss. She knew how to make people feel like collaborators, not subordinates. Eliza synced her phone to the office view screen. With a swipe, a map appeared, 12 glowing points across the city. "Here are the murder locations," she said. "The pattern, it all points to occultism." Voss leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at the screen. "These locations," she murmured, tracing the points with her finger. "It's a symbol." Eliza's head turned sharply. "A symbol?" "Yes," Voss said, her voice hushed. "An ancient one. When you look at them from above, it's deliberate." Ross felt a chill crawl up his spine. If Dreyer had not been so arrogant, he would have spotted this weeks ago. Eliza stared at the screen for a long moment, then spoke softly. "He's creating a symbol out of his victims." The room had gone quiet. Ross, Eliza, and Voss stared at the glowing symbol on the view screen, the murder sites forming strange, deliberate lines. "If we can decipher the meaning," Voss said softly, "it might give us answers. Perhaps even a way to predict the next location." Eliza crossed her legs and folded her arms. "And how are we going to do that, dear? If you knew the meaning, I take it you'd have spilled the beans already." Voss nodded. "The circle might help. There is an elder who could recognize it." "The circle?" Eliza asked. "It is a small gathering," Voss explained. "Practitioners, researchers, historians. We only meet during the half moon, when power is at its peak. That is in 2 weeks. Eliza raised a brow. "The elder won't meet before that?" Voss looked at her. The answer was complicated. They stay in exile by design. The circle maintains distance, but during half-moon gatherings, outsiders are allowed in, if invited. She looked at Eliza and Ross. 2 weeks. Eliza exhaled sharply but offered a smile. Thank you. It's a date. She reached into her coat and handed them each a card, elegant, black, with her name and a silver foil symbol. If anything happens, you call me. As they stepped into the hall, the tension gave way to something lighter. Eliza rested her hand briefly on Ross's shoulder. Thank you, she said gently. You are a lifesaver, Ross. I'll be in touch if anything comes up on my end. Ta-ta. Next chapter. The dream was vivid. Ross walked alone down the street. Rain fell in waves, soaking everything in sight. It was Corinville, the cracked pavement, the flickering lights, the heavy stillness. Ahead was the old theater. He stood before the poster in the display case. The words were different this time. No heroes will save us, scrawled in green letters. Then a scream behind him. He turned, but the downpour swallowed the figure's features. A voice echoed through the rain, followed by a cold laugh. It looks like someone has caught the attention of the Weaver. The street dissolved into gray. The world vanished into mist. Then a form emerged, a man dressed in all green. Usually you people are scared, the man said, smiling. Ross met his gaze. I'm not scared of you. The man chuckled, his voice smooth and cold. There may be hope for you yet. He vanished, blinking out of existence. From the silence came the sound of grinding gears and shifting metal. Robots appeared through the rain, eyes glowing red, claws spinning. More from above. The voice returned, a key. For those who will listen. They charged. Ross reacted instinctively. His hands burst with flame. He launched a bolt of fire at the first robot. It shattered. He spun. Another. Fire. Gone. But they kept coming. Too many. He panicked, his magic surging wildly. Then pain, a burning blade in his back. He screamed and woke. His palms were alight. Fire danced across his hands, summoned straight from the dream. Shit. 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 His sheets caught fire. He rolled out of bed, shifting his magic to ice. A freezing blast coated the smoldering fabric. The flames hissed, smoke rising. Coughing, he stumbled to the window and threw it open just before the fire alarm could trigger. He stood there, chest heaving, cold air rushing in. He looked at his hands, thankful for the safety net woven into the craft. His magic might be wild, but it couldn't harm its source. Next chapter. Eliza and Shelley stepped into Paul and Jenny's cozy home, the scent of garlic and herbs already drifting in from the kitchen. Guess who has the reclaimed brass clockwork perches? Eliza beamed, holding up a heavy, clinking satchel like a trophy. They may not be traditional garden decor, but they're so darling. Paul chuckled from the living room where he was adjusting a stack of mismatched cushions. I think we need those for the bird feeders. Might give the sparrows a little industrial flair, don't you think? Eliza lowered her oversized sunglasses just enough to give him a look. Oh, we have plenty, dear, even for the birds. From the kitchen, Jenny's voice called out, Oh, you're here. Dinner is just about ready. I hope you're in the mood for spaghetti. Shelley laughed as she kicked off her shoes. Jenny, yours is legendary. She rushed into the kitchen without a second thought to help. Paul and Eliza took their seats in the living room, the gentle clinking of pans and laughter from the kitchen filling the space with life. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, searching for a thread of conversation. Then Paul cleared his throat. Want to know about the history of industrial brass fittings? He asked, half grinning. Eliza turned to him, sunglasses still perched halfway down her nose. Of course, she said, settling in with a smile. Next chapter. Travis slid onto the bench next to Ross in the cafeteria, balancing a tray in one hand. Hey man, what's new? Ross looked up from his barely touched lunch. Hey, not much. Travis nodded toward him. Not wearing the wizard robe anymore, huh? I thought everyone in the class dressed according to their specialty. Ross gave a faint smile. Yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. He paused, searching for the right words. It doesn't feel right anymore, just regular clothes from now on. Travis picked up on the shift but did not push it. Anyway, he said, switching gears. A few of us are heading to the PB range tonight. Paintball. We were hoping you'd come. Paintball was a favorite among the students, loud, fast, and competitive. But Ross liked it for a different reason. It made his mind quiet. He moved, reacted, and focused. For a little while, everything else fell away. I'll be there, Ross said. Fantastic. See you tonight. Travis gave a nod and stood, disappearing into the lunch crowd. Ross leaned back in his seat, his eyes settling on his untouched drink. No more hats, no more roles, just Ross. The game went about as expected. Ross didn't come in first, but he didn't finish last either. The team moved with practiced focus, communicating in hand signals and shouts, flushed with adrenaline and paint. There was only one incident, an argument that turned nearly physical after someone was hit with a modified gun. Some of the advanced players liked to tinker with the pressure valves, turning their shots into welts outside the safety padding. It was frowned upon but hard to regulate. Okay, guys, enough, Travis shouted, stepping between them before fists could fly. Ross watched from a distance, helmet off, sweat drying on his neck. Just another day at the arena. Later, they sat on the benches outside as dusk set in. Travis flopped down next to Ross, still catching his breath. You did good out there, he said, elbowing him lightly. That shot on Clayman, what was that, 200 feet? Ross lit a cigarette, letting the smoke trail upward. Thanks. Travis leaned back. I heard you've been working with the police. Yeah, Ross said. They had some questions. One of the other players, Mitch from the back line, overheard. If that killer freak comes after me, I have a few surprises, he said, tapping the strap of his vest. Travis chuckled. Everyone is packing these days. He looked at Ross. What about you? Ross gave a slight grin, flicking ash off his cigarette. I have a few magical surprises. The half moon was just a day away. Outside Emberville, the mystic circle would be gathering soon, but Ross had not thought that far ahead yet. He stood quietly inside a small, familiar art gallery, surrounded by warm light and the hush that only art could bring. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't look. He already knew. Missed messages from Echo. More than a few. He had skipped a full week of classes without a word. Ever since the paintball match, he had pulled away. Each day, he let himself do something he actually loved. A walk through the park, a quiet bookstore, watching birds near the riverbank, staring at clouds for too long. He ignored the calls, the pings, the pressure. Perhaps once or twice he sent out a vague mass message. Hey, I'm okay. Just under the weather. Now, he stood before the statue he always came to see. A seated figure in stone. The pamphlet simply called it The Watcher. The trick, the little guide read, is to look at his expression. Ross closed his eyes for a breath, then opened them again. Blank at first, but then something. Concentration? No, perhaps insight. Like the figure was on the edge of understanding something no one else could see. I think he's thinking about the future, a soft voice said beside him. Ross turned slightly. A woman stood next to him, mid-40s, straight black hair, calm energy. A stranger, but somehow not unfamiliar. Strangers sometimes did this here. The gallery was like that, welcoming, open. People spoke like their thoughts belonged to everyone. Ross smiled. I'm thinking he has insight, like he knows something. He just hasn't said it yet. She shifted her gaze, considering. Yes, I see that. Then she winked and moved on, disappearing into the quiet hum of the gallery. Ross looked back at the statue. The future. Maybe she was right. The next stop was the outdoor cafe tucked into the corner of the local craft mall, a favorite spot of Ross's. He sat alone, earbuds in, listening to a playlist titled Sad Songs. A cigarette rested between his fingers. The sun filtered through overhead trees, dappling the table in shifting patterns of gold. A tap on his shoulder pulled him out of the moment. He turned. Echo stood there, her eyes tired and red. "I thought I'd find you here," she said. "Want to tell me what the hell is going on?" Ross stood, then gestured to the chair across from him. "Have a seat," he said, his voice even. "Yeah, we can talk." He lit his cigarette and exhaled slowly. Echo sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "What's wrong with you lately?" Ross stared into the distance for a long moment before speaking. "I just don't feel like I'm on the right track," he said finally. "A million miles away is more like it," she replied. Ross took a sip from his drink. "Yeah, can't really explain it." Echo leaned in. "Did you call the number I gave you?" Ross shook his head, barely glancing at her. "No." Her voice wavered. "I cannot keep going like this, Ross." He looked at her, calm and unblinking. "Then don't." She winced. "That's it?" Ross nodded quietly. "It's over between us." She did not respond. She simply stood, wiped a tear from her cheek, and walked away. Ross remained still. His face was unreadable. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down. A call. Eliza. Ross leaned back in his chair, the cigarette burning slowly between his fingers. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Next chapter. Ross stood at the corner in front of his apartment building, his hands in his pockets. The night air was cool against his skin. His watch read 8 p.m. He looked up. The half moon hung above the city, luminous and still, as if it had something to say. There were nights when the moon stopped people mid-step, when even the noise of the world seemed to hush for a second. People would look up, take pictures, and whisper about how strange or beautiful it looked. Was this one of those nights? Before the thought could settle, a car pulled up beside him. It was flashy, red. The windows were tinted. Music pulsed softly from inside, low, confident, and unmistakably Eliza. A single gloved hand emerged from a half-rolled window, waving him in with effortless flair. Ross could not help but smile. He opened the door and slid inside. The car squealed away from the curb, disappearing into the night. Ross stepped into the car and was immediately greeted by a soft wash of multicolored lights pulsing gently across the interior. The lights shifted in time with the music, a strange ambient track he could not quite place. It was not loud, just there, as if the car itself was humming along. At the steering wheel sat Eliza, draped head to toe in sleek black. She wore her signature oversized sunglasses and a massive flower corsage pinned dramatically to her upper right side. Beside her sat Voss, also dressed in black, but far more understated. Practical, elegant, and calm. Both women turned as he settled into his seat. "Hey guys," Ross said. "Thanks for inviting me." Eliza smiled, adjusting her corsage as if it were a living creature. "Of course," she said. "You are the lucky soul who set all this in motion by talking to little old me." Voss glanced at her, amused. "I've been meaning to ask," she said dryly. "You can see the road with those sunglasses and tinted windows, right?" Eliza tilted her head thoughtfully, as if running numbers in her mind. "Of course," she said at last with utter confidence. Ross could not help it. He laughed at her delivery, her commitment, her entire existence. Whatever Eliza was doing, she was doing it, and Ross was just along for the ride. The car came to a stop at the edge of a wooded path, where pavement gave way to worn stones and soil. The forest ahead was alive with quiet, crickets, the distant rush of a creek, and the occasional low rustle of something unseen. Ross stepped out, the air crisp against his skin. It felt different here, heavier, but not in a threatening way, like something was watching, or waiting. Eliza and Voss moved ahead without a word, following a soft trail marked by lanterns strung low in the trees. The lights flickered amber, swaying gently in the breeze. Ross followed. The music from the car faded behind him, replaced by the subtle sounds of nature. Then those, too, began to disappear, one by one. No footsteps, no birds, only breath. After a few minutes, the trail opened into a small clearing. There was a low stone bench near the center, under a crooked tree where the half-moon hung directly overhead, casting pale light through bare branches. Voss and Eliza continued toward a group in the distance, faint outlines of cloaked figures already gathered near a fire. But Ross stopped. He sat on the bench alone, letting the stillness settle in his bones. This was not like the world he knew. There were no rules here, no structures, no grades, and no empty praise. Just quiet. Just being. He stared up at the moon, feeling as if it saw him, really saw him, for the first time. His fingers tingled slightly, the familiar pull of his magic waking up. He did not summon it. It simply responded. A soft warmth in his palms, a flicker under his skin. Nothing dangerous. Just there. Ross took a slow breath. You're stepping into something else now, the thought came, unspoken and deep, and for once, he did not feel the need to run. Ross felt uneasy. He had expected maybe a dozen people in a living room, mumbling over teacups. But this was a gathering. Lanterns hung in the trees like soft stars, casting a gentle glow across the clearing. Figures moved quietly among the shadows, their voices low, their presence serene. A fire crackled near the center, and the smell of herbs, lavender, sage, and something older drifted through the night air. He was not even sure if he could light a cigarette out here. Just as he shifted on the stone bench, a voice spoke from behind him. You must be Ross. He stood up faster than he had meant to, brushing off his jacket. A woman stood there, mid-30s, wearing a black robe and a hood that framed her face. Straight black hair fell past her shoulders. Her voice carried a softness that somehow cut through the silence. Yes, he said, offering a hand. That's me. She took it, her grip steady. My name is Clara, she said. I'm part of the circle. My grandmother is the lead elder. Nice to meet you, Ross said, trying to read her expression. First time at a circle meeting like this? She asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Yeah, Ross replied. I practice magic, but in a classroom. Clara smiled, the kind that did not need to prove anything. I can sense it. Wizard magic. Ross hesitated. He could not tell if it was a question or a statement. Yes, elemental. She gave him a knowing look, her eyes catching the moonlight. This might be a little different than what you are used to. The circle meeting had begun. Ross stood at the edge of the clearing, watching from a respectful distance. Hooded figures gathered around the fire, their low chanting rising and falling like waves. There was no formality, no declaration of beginning. It simply was. They spoke in gentle voices, read aloud from worn books with frayed edges, and eventually settled into quiet meditation. Ross stayed still, observing, listening. Then he felt it, the faintest buzz in his pocket. His phone. Thank the stars he had turned the sound off. A ringtone out here would have felt like a gunshot in a library. Keeping his movements subtle, he reached into his coat and flicked the phone off completely. Whoever was calling, whoever was on the other end of that buzz, they would never imagine where he was right now. He slipped it back into his pocket and refocused. As the group finished their meditation, they stood and joined hands around the fire. For a moment, the entire gathering seemed to pulse with stillness. Then, movement. Some of the hooded members began to step away, speaking quiet goodbyes as they disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Ross was still watching when he felt a soft breath against his ear. We can meet the elders now, Clara whispered from behind. Ross turned, catching sight of Eliza and Voss already making their way toward a small hut near the edge of the clearing. He took a breath. Here we go, he murmured, and followed them into the deeper heart of the circle. The interior of the hut was dim but warm, lit by candles in wall niches. The space was just large enough to hold a small gathering, close but not crowded. Tapestries lined the walls, and bundles of dried herbs filled the air with earth and smoke. 3 elders sat in tall, curved chairs. Their robes seemed more like layers of time than fabric. Voss stepped forward and bowed her head. "Elders, I bring Eliza Brightwell and Ross Boone. They come with questions." One elder, a woman with silver hair braided over her shoulder, lifted her gaze. "Ah," she said, her voice like weathered wood, "one visitor outside of fate, and one whom fate has chosen." The other 2 nodded in unison, eyes half-lidded. One, a thin man with a voice like rustling leaves, motioned toward Ross. "Come closer," he said. "Who are you, young man?" Ross stepped forward hesitantly. "I am Ross Boone, currently a student at—" The elder raised a hand gently, cutting him off. "Who are you on the inside?" The question struck Ross like a sudden gust of wind. I do not know that," he admitted, after a long pause. The elder smiled. "An honest answer." Then her eyes shifted to Eliza. "And the one outside of fate. Your story is a unique thread indeed." Eliza gave a casual shrug, one hand on her hip. "You all throw a great party." The elders chuckled softly, like leaves brushing across stone. "You may all sit," the older woman said. "You are our guests here." They settled on cushions near the hearth, the fire crackling low beside them. The woman elder leaned forward. "Now then, what is it you seek?" Voss stepped forward and unfolded a piece of paper, holding it out carefully. "We are hoping you can help us with this," she said, her voice steady. "These are the locations of the recent murders. When you look at them from above, when you connect the sites, they are not random. They form a deliberate pattern. We believe it is tied to the suspect." The 3 elders leaned in, eyes sharpening as they examined the paper. They exchanged a silent, knowing glance, one that sent a ripple of tension through the room. Finally, the woman with the silver braid spoke. "An ancient symbol," she said softly. "Rare, and used only in one context." Ross leaned forward slightly, catching her next word. "Shame." "It was reserved," another elder added, his voice grim, "for the worst transgressors of the craft. Those who turned to the darkest paths, who used their gifts to kill or corrupt." The 3rd elder, older still, spoke in a low whisper. "I had hoped never to see it again." Eliza stepped forward, arms folded, eyes sharp. "When was the last time it was used? Any names we can follow?" The elders looked at one another again. "It was not used by our people," the braided elder said. "It belonged to a dissolved order, one that fractured and scattered long ago." "Dead end, then," Eliza muttered, frowning. "Not necessarily," the eldest elder said. His fingers tapped softly on the arm of his chair. "We can consult the mirror. It may reveal more." Eliza's expression shifted instantly. "Perfect," she said, flashing a smile. Ross didn't like this. He could feel a pressure in the air, static before a storm or magic just before it sparks. A few hooded members of the circle carefully rolled in a large glass orb as tall as Ross's chest. It shimmered faintly even in the dim light. As they passed, Clara turned and gave Ross a soft smile before sitting beside Eliza, who was casually filing her nails, perfectly unfazed. All the candles were extinguished, save for one. Shadows stretched and breathed across the walls. The elders and the hooded figures began to speak in a strange language, their voices building into a rhythmic chant. Ross's heartbeat quickened. He tried to focus on his breathing, his fingers tightening around the sides of his chair. Not now, he thought. Now would be the worst possible time. The orb lit up without a signal. Inside, clouds began to swirl. Images formed. Ross leaned forward. It was a bird's-eye view, swooping over rooftops and darting through narrow alleys, then landing. The vision tilted down to a metal pole. An object lay on the ground. Metal. The image sharpened, then the colors shifted. The gray of the city gave way to a creeping green fog. It rolled through the buildings like smoke, like rot. The chanting faltered. Then, Laughter. Soft at first, then louder. Mocking. Ross's blood ran cold. He knew that voice from his dream. The air thickened. Energy buzzed like bees under the skin. Suddenly, from within the swirling green mist inside the orb, a hand emerged. Pale fingers, graceful and deliberate. A murmur rippled through the room. Ross stayed frozen as a man slowly stepped out of the orb, fully formed, fully real. He wore a deep green suit, tailored and old-fashioned. A matching hat cast a shadow over piercing eyes. Eliza removed her sunglasses in a single, slow motion, dramatic and deliberate. Ross lit wizard fire in both palms, the flames twisting. One of the elders gave him a small shake of the head, a look that said, "You will not need that." The man in green took a step forward, brushing dust from his sleeves. "What am I doing here?" he asked, his tone light and curious. One of the elders answered calmly, "Fate brought you to us." The man rolled his eyes with theatrical flair. "Oh, great." "Let me guess," the man in green said, flicking open a silver pocket watch and glancing at it impatiently. "You want to ask about the murders?" He sighed, as if bored with the entire premise. One elder responded gently, "You hold knowledge that may aid our guests." The man in green laughed, dry and sharp. "My job is to provide keys, not solve crimes," he said. "Besides," he looked directly at Ross, his eyes narrowing just enough to chill the air. "I already gave a hint to this one. Clearly he didn't catch it." Ross did not move. The flames in his palms flickered out on their own. "I work for the Weaver," the man continued, pacing with slow, deliberate steps. "I don't answer to you," he said, pointing to the elder. "Or you," he added with a smirk toward Eliza. "Or even you," he finished, his eyes locked on Ross. There was no threat in his voice, just the certainty that he existed outside their rules. One elder spoke again, calm and steady. "You have provided what we needed. We thank you." The man in green paused, considered. "Well then," he said with a sigh, snapping the watch shut. "Thank you for disturbing me while I was in the middle of something." Without another word, he stepped backward into the crystal orb. The mist began to recede. His form dissolved into smoke, and in seconds the orb was clear once more. Still. The room was silent. Ross sat on a log at the edge of the gathering, a cigarette trembling between his fingers. His hands would not stop shaking. He had seen strange things studying magic, illusions, summoned flame, bending wind. But this was something else entirely. The others had seen his reaction. No one pressed, no one followed. They simply gave him space to process, to breathe, to fall apart if he needed to. And so he did the only thing that felt familiar. He smoked, but it wasn't helping. The world still spun in slow, dizzy circles. He kept seeing those green eyes, that smirk, the feeling of being targeted. The way the man in green had pointed him out, like this was all a game Ross had no idea how to play. Ross exhaled shakily. He should have stayed home. Then, footsteps. Two figures sat down on either side of him. Eliza on the right, Voss on the left. "Hey, partner," Voss said gently. "We figured we would come help you unwind." Ross tried to say something, but his hand trembled too much to bring the cigarette to his lips. Without a word, Eliza took it from his fingers and brought it to her own. She took a slow drag and exhaled like it was second nature. "I used to smoke a couple packs a day," she said, almost casually. "Kept the nerves from showing. Until it didn't." Ross gave a faint smile. "I'm okay," he said quietly. They didn't respond right away. They didn't have to. Just sitting there with him, no questions, no advice, was enough. The fire had burned down to embers. Most of the gathering had gone. Only a few soft voices lingered in the woods, quiet, respectful, distant. Ross sat alone on the log again, a fresh cigarette in hand, though he had not lit it. The orb, the green mist, the man in green, the recognition, the message. I already gave a hint to this one. Ross dragged his fingers through his hair, staring at the dirt between his boots. What in the actual hell was going on? He had seen magic before, controlled, measured, cast in patterns and rules. But this felt older, wilder. It didn't ask for permission. Mind if I sit? He looked up. Clara stood nearby, her robe draped around her like a second skin, her straight black hair catching the faint light of the moon. Ross nodded, and she eased down beside him without a word. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that did not need to be filled. Then Ross let out a slow breath. I don't even know what's real anymore. Clara tilted her head. Define real. Ross laughed once, a little sharp but not over the line. That's not helpful. Is it not? She said softly. He looked at her, wanting to ask if he was losing his mind. Instead, he said, Have you ever felt like maybe you are not in control of your own story anymore? Clara looked back at the glowing embers. Yes, she said quietly. But sometimes that's when the story starts getting honest. Ross did not know how to respond to that, so he just lit the cigarette and sat there beside someone who did not try to fix it or explain it away. And for the first time that night, he did not feel like he was spinning off the map, just standing at the edge of something he did not understand yet. And maybe that was okay. Next chapter. The ride home was pure disorientation. Ross held on to anything he could, his seatbelt, the edge of the door, the weight of his phone, anything to remind himself he was still here, still real. His fingers brushed something else in his pocket, the folded piece of paper Clara had handed him. If you feel like you're slipping, she had said, this'll help you find footing. He closed his eyes, letting the muted hum of tires lull him into a rhythm. In the front seat, Eliza was chatting with Voss, as animated as ever. So, volcanic rock, she was saying. There's a history there. Volcanic soil, volcanic rage, volcanic skin care. Ross opened one eye, unsure whether to find it comforting or concerning that this was the conversation happening after witnessing a man step out of a prophecy globe. Above him, the car's interior lights were a restless, cycling spectrum, drifting from soft amber to a deep, bruised purple. It was supposed to be soothing, but in his current state, it felt like the car was trying too hard to stay upbeat. As he leaned his head against the cool glass of the window, trying to gather himself, the cycle stopped. The neon strips along the back seat didn't flicker. They didn't pulse. They simply transitioned into a deep, heavy green. It wasn't alarming. There was no sudden spike in the music or a chill in the air. It was just odd. The color was the exact shade of the man in green suit, a mossy, ancient emerald that seemed to absorb the rest of the light in the cabin. Ross stared at it, his heart skipping a single uneven beat. He looked at the back of Eliza's seat, waiting for her to say something about the change. But she was still mid-sentence, her voice a steady hum of volcanic skincare and magical exfoliation. Ross closed his eyes, pressing his lids tight until he saw static. He took one slow, deliberate breath, counting to 3. When he opened them, the green was gone. The lights were back to their restless cycling, shifting from violet to a pale, harmless blue. Everything was normal. The car eventually came to a smooth stop. Ross stepped out, blinking at the quiet of his own street. "Don't forget, tomorrow," Eliza shouted. "I'll give you a ring. Ta-ta, dearie dearums." And then she was gone, the red car purring like a cat into the night. Next chapter. Ross couldn't stay home. He tried. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the ceiling, holding the paper Clara gave him as if it might pulse with answers. But still he could not be there. Not alone. Not after what he'd seen. He needed noise, laughter, people talking about stupid things. Something. Anything that didn't feel like fate pressing down on his chest. It was Thursday night. The usual crew would still be awake. These things always ran late, sometimes until dawn. He checked the time. 2:15 a.m. Yeah, he thought. They'll still be there. He threw on his jacket, nothing fancy, just something with weight to it, and headed out the door. The night air hit him like a reset button. Cool, crisp, normal. Streetlights hummed. A distant siren wailed, then faded. Good, he thought. I need normal. He walked faster, toward the noise, toward the smoke, the drinks, the card games, toward the messy, ordinary world that made no sense but at least did not pretend to. He was right. The gathering was still going strong. Travis answered the door, shirt wrinkled, eyes glazed but still functioning. He wasn't quite stumbling drunk, but he was definitely on his way. "Hey, everyone," he called out, lifting his drink. "It's Ross." A cheer rose from the few who were still awake enough to register it. Nice and normal, Ross thought. The comfort of old chaos. "Oh, shit, Ross," Cindy blurted, nearly dropping her drink as she turned and saw him. "I didn't recognize you. What's with the 5 o'clock shadow and that wild hair?" Before Ross could answer, one of the other girls elbowed her and whispered something into her ear. Cindy's eyes widened. "Eek, I'm sorry." They giggled awkwardly and stumbled off together. Ross made a beeline for the bathroom. He locked the door behind him and turned on the light, then froze. They were right. The mirror didn't lie. His hair was a mess, as if he had been sleeping in a wind tunnel for a week. The beginnings of a beard curled along his jawline, uneven and half-formed. When was the last time I shaved? Or even looked in a mirror? The last week of class, maybe. When he started letting it go, letting himself become whatever this was. He splashed cold water on his face and ran a wet hand through his hair, trying to fix something, anything. It didn't help. Back in the main room, the energy was still buzzing, music playing low, someone laughing too loudly at nothing. Ross stepped out into it, blinking against the dim light and haze. Travis stumbled toward him with a half-finished beer in hand. "Got some bad news if you're looking for Echo," he said, jerking a thumb toward the hallway. He pointed at a closed bedroom door. A beer bottle lay just outside it. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. Ross blinked at the closed door. "Wait," he said slowly. "Already? We just broke up yesterday." Travis gave a lazy laugh, shrugging as if it were old news. "Yesterday? My man, she has been doing that for at least 3 months." Ross felt the world shift. 3 months? Behind his back? He stared at the floor, the sound of the party fading into a dull hum. "Blaine?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Travis nodded. "One of them was—" "Yeah." Ross's stomach dropped. All those nights, all that pretending. The way Echo smiled as if everything were fine. He moved numbly to the living room. Vivian was there, sitting alone, watching the view screen as if it held answers to questions no one could ask. She knew. She had to know Blaine was in there. With Echo. Ross wanted to say something, but his throat felt tight. He sank into the nearest spot on the sofa next to Travis, who was halfway to unconsciousness. After a long pause, Ross asked quietly, "Hey, did you ever see anything weird? Like, something that you couldn't explain?" Travis cracked one eye open. Then he burst into laughter. "Shit, you're all screwed up, man. Is it that new chick you've been hanging with?" Travis's eyes gleamed with alcohol and ignorance. "Man, that girl is batshit crazy. Got you into some real woo-woo shit, didn't she?" Ross turned to look at him. "It's just a question," he said, steady. "You know, since we're best friends." Travis laughed again. "Hey, a word of advice. Get back on track, man. Quit with the crazy talk. People will love you again." Ross sat forward, elbows on his knees. But nothing made sense. Not here. Not anymore. He stood without a word, turned toward the door and left. He needed to be alone. He needed to go home. Morning light filtered through the blinds in uneven strips. Ross opened his eyes, surprised he'd slept at all. His body felt heavy. His mind heavier. He checked his messages. Nothing. No Echo. No Travis. No apologies. No explanations. He rose and shuffled into the kitchen. He started the coffee maker with the kind of muscle memory that only comes from routine. Moments later, he sat on the sofa, mug in hand, the warmth steadying him more than the caffeine. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out 2 pieces of paper. The first, a number. Jennifer, the student who had said transfer students were welcome. A new school, a clean slate, a way out. The second, Clara's number. If you feel like you're slipping, she'd said, this will help you find your footing. 2 paths, one that led to safety, a reset button he could press and never look back, and the other led deeper into the unknown, into a life unplanned. He stared at both for a long time. Then, slowly, he picked up his phone and entered a number. Next chapter. Eliza sipped her coffee contentedly, watching a group of baffled officers gathered around a bulky, steam-powered contraption in the corner of the department break room. The machine hissed softly, gears clicking and steam curling from its brass vents. "Pull the handle," one officer said, squinting at the maze of levers. "I did pull the handle. Nothing happened," another replied, tapping the side as if it owed him money. "I just put my cup under here and pressed this little button," Eliza said, motioning to a near-invisible switch tucked beneath a valve. The group froze, looked at each other. Then, unison murmurs. "Oh, that makes sense. Why didn't I see that?" Eliza offered a charming shrug. "I'm full of mysteries. Brightwell, in my office." Detective Power's voice rang out from across the floor. She turned without missing a beat. "Gotta go," she said sweetly. "Good luck with your coffee contraption." The machine gave a triumphant hiss behind her, as if in agreement. Detective Powers did not look amused. "Just when were you planning to tell me," he growled, "that you had a lead out in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of robed cult members?" Eliza offered a serene smile. "At the meeting this afternoon." Powers stood, hands on his hips. "You had a lead. I should have been there." Eliza tilted her head. "Oh, you wouldn't have fit in. It required a very specialized unit." "Yeah?" Powers snapped. "Like who?" "Me," Eliza said plainly. "And an adorable magic student with potential. I'm thinking we should deputize him." Powers stared at her, slack-jawed. "A civilian?" The moment the word left his mouth, he groaned and clutched his stomach. The office robot, without missing a beat, rolled over and extended a bottle. "Antacids, sir," it said. Powers snatched the bottle. Eliza leaned against the desk, sipping her coffee. The meeting room was filled with quiet chatter and the soft hum of tech warming up. Eliza stood at the center, her oversized sunglasses perched atop her head, a laser pointer in hand. Around her sat the core team: Powers, Shelley, Perkins, and the others. "We need Ross," Eliza began, scanning the room. "I texted him," Shelley said. "He'll be a little late." Eliza nodded, then pointed to the screen. "Our lead is this." She clicked. An image of a small piece of twisted metal appeared. "I snapped the picture that was in the crystal ball." Powers scoffed. "That's it?" "No," a voice came from the back. "That's not all." Heads turned. Ross stood in the doorway, Clara beside him. Ross stepped forward. "There are battle robots involved, somehow. That was the clue the man in green was trying to tell me." Eliza grinned. "There you have it. A murder case involving battle robots, a mysterious piece of metal, and, oh yes, a disgraced former occultist." Powers rubbed his temples. "So the man in green is not our killer?" "No," Clara answered. "He's what we call a key giver. He works for forces beyond this world. He's not a murderer." "Then why was he at Oliver's murder?" Shelley asked. Clara's eyes were steady. "Otherworldly beings sometimes witness fate in motion. They do not interfere. They observe." The room fell quiet. Powers finally broke the silence. "So, we are looking for someone else entirely." The meeting was over. Eliza approached Ross and Clara, her tone light but her expression measured. "Thank you both," she said. "I guess this is it. We can take it from here." Ross stiffened. "Wait." No, I want to keep helping. Clara nodded beside him. We both do. Eliza glanced toward Detective Powers, who was glaring at a spreadsheet like it owed him rent. She leaned in slightly, her sunglasses sliding down just enough to flash her eyes. Well, Detective Powers won't like it. So, consider yourselves part of the team. She turned on her heel and walked away. Ross watched her go, the rush of adrenaline finally settling. He turned to Clara. You were going to show me more of the circle? The land the elders own? Clara gave a warm smile. Let's go. Next chapter. The rain wasn't letting up. It hammered the pavement as if it were trying to wash something clean. But this city had stains that ran too deep. Steam curled up from the gutters, thick and slow, the kind of steam that made everything feel like a dream you weren't sure you wanted to wake up from. The night didn't promise answers, not anymore. Brightwell had been holding back. Powers could feel it. She danced through shadows with a smile and left just enough truth on the table to keep him from flipping it. But the city didn't care about secrets. The city demanded answers, and Powers had run out of reasons to wait. He pulled on his gray fedora, the brim already damp. His trench coat was older than half the rookies in the department, but it still fit like a second skin. This was not a department case anymore. This was personal. It was time to step into the underbelly, shake loose some answers, follow the steam and smoke down alleys no one else wanted to walk. It was time to remind this city why they used to call him Ace. The pattern is set. The key giver has done his work. Volume 2 has come to a close, but for Ross, the real study has only just begun. From the halls of the Academy to the ancient lands of the Circle, we've watched the Ashes of Emberville begin to glow. But as magic meets metal, the question remains, can you ever truly outrun your own story? Thank you for listening to this chapter of Ross's transformation. If you enjoyed the ride, hit that subscribe button and join our circle. The Weaver is still stitching the future, and you won't want to miss where the next thread leads. See you in Volume 3.